Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a perfectly adequate show for you today. Nothing super special, but on balance, probably be glad you watched it. Right, Robby?
I love this. I love this ritual every morning, and I know our fans do as well. So I appreciate it.
We will deliver on adequacy today.
We will do what we've promised to do,
right.
And we will do it with smiles on our faces. So former presidential candidate Marianne Williamson joins us to discuss her efforts in backing non-corporate candidates. Host of the Bad Faith podcast, Brianna Joy Gray, also here to break down the lawsuit against Alec Baldwin. Senior editor at Reason, Liz Wolfe, will explain the case for crypto in the Freedom Convoy saga.
We also have Amy Tarkanian and Michael Starr Hopkins joining us for our Rising panel, where we'll discuss President Biden's remarks on Ukraine. Take a listen to some of that.
From the beginning of this crisis, I have been absolutely clear and consistent. The United States is prepared no matter what happens. We are ready with diplomacy, to be engaged in diplomacy with Russia and our allies and partners to improve stability and security in Europe as a whole. And we are ready to respond decisively to Russian attack on Ukraine, which is still very much a possibility. But if Russia attacks Ukraine, it would be a war of choice or a war without cause or reason. I say these things not to provoke, but to speak the truth. Because the truth matters. Accountability matters. If Russia does invade in the days and weeks ahead, the human cost for Ukraine will be immense. And the strategic cost for Russia will also be immense. If Russia attacks Ukraine, it'll be met with overwhelming international condemnation.
So today is Wednesday, February 16th, the day that the U.S. said that Russia would be invading Ukraine. They're not. So let's talk about Prince Andrew instead. The British royal settled a sex abuse lawsuit with Epstein Accuser Virginia Giuffre, according to a court filing in Manhattan, sparing Prince Andrew a humiliating court battle, or more humiliation.
Right.
As we've discussed at length on this show, Giuffre claimed Andrew raped and abused her when she was only 17 years old. The Duke was just weeks away from giving testimony to Virginia's lawyers in London. The surprise settlement leaves many questions unanswered and begs the question, who will pay for the settlement, given Andrew's financial ups and downs?
The sum of money agreed upon may never be released, but we do know the Queen will help foot the bill and pay Giuffre more than £12 million, which is around $16.2 million. The allegations have seen the royal family shaken as the Duke was stripped of his titles, and according to Reuters, Andrew is unlikely to ever step into public life again. Joining us now to break this all down is culture editor at The Federalist, Emily Jashinsky.
Hey, guys.
Hi, Emily. Thank you for being with us. So what do you make of these latest developments?
You know, it's the same pattern that repeats itself in the long, tragic saga of the Epstein abuse scandal over and over again, and that power will be challenged, and then it sort of is able to win the day. And I'm not saying that Prince Andrew has totally won anything, and of course this is far from a game, but he has secured his ability to avoid the deposition that was set to happen in just a couple of weeks, and he did that with money. And Virginia Giuffre, I think part of the benefit in this entire situation, the silver lining here, is she has already been out saying her piece. She has done a lot of media. She has been in documentaries. She has aired her accusations, and Prince Andrew failed miserably in the court of public opinion, and it was going to go very poorly for him actually in a real court of law. But we do still have the court of public opinion. We have the battle that we've seen play out with our own eyes and ears, and it went really poorly for him. It's going to continue to go poorly for him. But this is what happens time and again in the Epstein situation. It just happened with the Maxwell trial. Like, you can have a trial, you can let some of the stuff gets out there, but the full truth is always obscured. And it is always obscured by power sort of winning that tug of war.
And what do you think made the difference here? Why do you think she was able to get him to cave on this and settle?
Yeah, I think the royal family has been distancing and has been trying to keep him at arm's length, specifically the Queen. And we've seen that increase recently. And I think what happened is just it got so bad for them that they said this is the only way out. It is unbecoming, I'm sure, is in their eyes, for you to sit for a deposition. And they already had seen the way he did in media before, and it was really bad. So to have that play out actually in a court, let alone just in a media interview. I'm sure they wanted to avoid that at all costs, and they put a number on it. And I think that where the money's coming from is a great question, too, for the people, of course. But they were able to put a number on it and then do pretty much anything that it took to keep that from happening, because we already know, given his prior performances, how insanely embarrassing it would be.
Well, Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles will be crowned side by side in a scaled-back coronation at the request of the Queen. It's reported fewer members of the royal family will be seen in attendance, so we'll see if Prince Andrew gets an invite. Do you think he'll be there? I would bet not.
No, I think they want to, and that's sort of what we were just talking about. They want to keep him away because, again, he has never had a good explanation for this. And if he did, we would have heard it. By all means, we would have heard it, but we didn't, because there is just no good explanation. He has no good response to Giuffre's allegations. So he's never been able to sort of squirm his way out of it, because there's just nothing he can say.
Yeah, and if he was going to respond to them, it seemed like he was creeping up towards some type of an admission. There were in some of his recent filings, he was saying, basically, I'm not admitting anything one way or another, but if I did do it, then it would have been consensual, and I would not have been the one that was trafficking her. I was just an innocent person involved in this trafficking circle who happened to be with her. And then they kind of added on to that, and maybe she's actually the real criminal here, because she then was involved, according to him, in recruiting some other younger people into this trafficking circle. And so he really started to push the limits on what kind of defense he was going to offer.
All of that could actually be true, but it would not have changed the fact that he had sex with someone who was underage, so it's not consensual regardless.
Right. And so the public reaction to that explanation was just a collective, gross.
Right.
What's wrong with you? But also, Prince Andrew has, for years, Emily, had his own kind of business interests going on. He's got a real estate empire around the world. He's involved with all of these kind of shady bankers. He's the guy that shady characters would bring into a deal to make their business transaction look a little bit more legitimate. Like he was serving kind of a Hunter Biden role for some of these figures. And so, do you think he's amassed enough wealth through that he'll be able to extract from Luxembourg enough money to pay this off?
Well, it may be, and that's where I think Prince Andrew's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein is in and of itself, and has always been especially interesting. And that's the case time and again with people that were in Jeffrey Epstein's circles. You often find that there are these types of characters. So it's possible he has money. If he does, it may have dried up in recent years because he probably hasn't been able to sell Access, and I don't know what his spending habits are like, but he's definitely not been able to sell Access in recent years. And, the other thing to just keep in mind with all of this is that the journalist who has been on top of this entire story down in Florida and in Palm Beach, even she has said that there are pretty clear allegations that Epstein was involved in with intelligence communities, with the intelligence apparatus attached to different governments. And so that is an important element to keep in mind anytime we're talking about Epstein's relationships with royals or people in the government, because you have to, the court, this didn't play out as fully as it should have in the Maxwell trial, because I think you can talk about the way she was prosecuted, and we did talk about it here on this show. It was hardly satisfying. But, whether or not that would have happened with Prince Andrew, some of that stuff, could start to come out, and it would be damning not just for him, but for, the people he's surrounded by as well.
It just occurred to me, actually, a lot of his investments are tied up in commercial real estate, and it's been a brutal couple of years for commercial real estate. So that's not going well for him.
Gonna have to ask the Queen.
Gonna have to ask the Queen for another bailout. So where does this go next? Like who are the other people who are caught up in this who could still see some accountability?
Well, we could still see, and that's the thing, like, this is just the trial that was scheduled. And so there will be other things that will come up. I mean, different people, there are all kinds of allegations against all kinds of people. And so there could be other things happening in the Maxwell case. So she's set to be sentenced, I think, in June. But that's the thing with the Epstein, the entire Epstein story is it could never go away just because there are so many women that were involved and so many powerful figures. I think over the course of the next at least decade, if not more, we will continue to hear people making allegations and filing court documents and trying to get to trial. And I think, again, we're just going to see this frustrating pattern repeat itself over and over again. And hopefully some of the women who were abused do get, if they're looking for settlements, if they're looking for justice, they get some modicum of comfort from the process, and the public can learn, these little bits and pieces along the way. But I think this is going to go on for a very long time in different forms, just because the web of abuse is so vast.
Indeed. Emily Jashinsky, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Coming up next, we'll tell you what's on our radar. Stick around for that.